The Chalnoth's warships tore into humanity's colony world New Eden like hungry wolves, slaughtering 50,000 colonists in a matter of hours. Chris Johnson gritted his teeth and returned fire as the 7-foot-tall cyborg warlord Nesso led his troops in a merciless extermination. Outnumbered 1,000 to 1, the ex-marine still cut down a dozen reptilian warriors with his assault rifle before a plasma shot took his legs out from under him. He crawled behind a low wall as the colony burned. A clawed hand grabbed Chris by the throat, lifting his broken body up to stare into the glowing red eyes of Nesso himself. "You fought well for a human," the warlord growled. "I think I'll keep you as a trophy, a reminder of how easily your kind fell before the might of the Chalnoth." Chris spat blood in the alien's face. "Humanity will make you pay for this, I promise you that." Nesso laughed, a cruel grating sound, and tossed Chris to his soldiers. They dragged him to their ships as a slave, to be paraded before the Chalnoth Emperor as a symbol of Nesso's victory. What the warlord didn't know was that Chris Johnson was a member of the Olympus Project, humanity's most elite cyborg super soldiers, kept hidden until now, and the Olympians were ready to strike back against the aliens who had terrorized the galaxy for far too long. The Chalnoth ship docked in Karnthak, the capital city of Zektos Prime. Chris, his wrists and ankles shackled, was dragged out onto a massive parade ground. Thousands of Chalnoth citizens packed the streets, cheering and jeering as a battered Chris was paraded past them like a prized trophy. Nesso led the procession, his chest puffed out with pride. He marched Chris right up to a towering palace of black metal and glowing red lights. At the top of a grand staircase stood Emperor Zorthak himself, an imposing sight at 10 feet tall. His exoskeleton was adorned with intricate carvings, and his eyes glowed with cybernetic enhancements. "My Lord Emperor," Nesso called out, shoving Chris to his knees, "I present to you a human slave, proof of our victory over their pathetic colony." Zorthak leaned down, roughly grabbing Chris's face and turning it side to side as if inspecting a piece of meat. "This creature still has some fight in it. Good. It will make for entertaining sport. Throw it into the gladiator pits." Guards hauled Chris to a lift that plunged deep underground. He was tossed into a large cell, already occupied by a menagerie of aliens from a dozen different species. All of them looked battle-scarred and half-starved. A huge, four-armed creature with green scales approached Chris. "A human? Never seen your kind here before. I am Kelzor of the Krathian people. The Chalnoth conquered my world cycles ago. I've been fighting in these pits since." "Chris Johnson, ex-marine and apparently now a gladiator," Chris said, shaking one of Kelsor's hands. "The Chalnoth just destroyed my colony, killed thousands of my people." "Then you have as much reason to hate them as I do," Kelzor growled. "Stick with me in the arena, human. We'll watch each other's backs." Over the next weeks, Chris and Kelzor fought side by side in the brutal matches, taking down wave after wave of vicious alien creatures and hardened warriors, all for the bloodthirsty entertainment of the Chalnoth spectators. In the quiet hours between fights, Chris used his enhanced mental abilities to memorize every detail he overheard from the guards about Chalnoth security, troop numbers, and the layout of the city. He was already forming a plan for escape and revenge. Light years away on Earth, Admiral Elena Pavlova slammed her fist on her desk as she read the report on the fall of New Eden and the capture of Chris Johnson. She knew the secrets in his brain could jeopardize the entire Olympus project if the Chalnoth ripped them from his mind. "Get me Captain Harris and his team now," she barked at her aide. This mission could turn the tide of the war, but only if they rescued Chris in time. The Chalnoth supply ship flew low over the toxic swamps of Zektos Prime. In its cargo hold, Jack Harris checked the charge on his plasma rifle one last time. "Get ready, we're almost at the drop point." His team nodded, their faces grim with determination. Their armor shifted color, blending into the metal bulkheads. Enhanced muscles coiled, ready to spring into action. This mission was critical. They had to get Chris Johnson out before the Chalnoth ripped apart his mind and discovered the secrets of the Olympus project. The ship shuddered as it docked at a remote landing pad on the outskirts of Karnthak. Chalnoth soldiers hauled crates down the ramp, not noticing as 4 armored figures slipped away into the shadows of the spaceport. Jack scanned the alien architecture, his HUD feeding him tactical data. Alex, Mike, secure us a route to the gladiator pits. Sarah, you're with me. We're on rescue duty. In the arena, Chris slammed a Horath berserker to the ground, bones crunching. The crowd roared for blood as he raised his fist for the killing blow. In the stands, Warlord Nesso watched, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. This human was lasted far too long. He fought with the skill of a seasoned warrior, not some colonial farmer. He turned to his guards. "Bring me that slave. I want him interrogated, thoroughly." Chris and Kelzor were catching their breath in their cell when the guards arrived. Electro-whips crackled. "Human, you're coming with us. Warlord's orders." Kelzor snarled, stepping forward, but Chris waved him back. "I'll be all right, big guy, just sit tight." He marched out, head held high despite the chains. In the bowels of the Colosseum, Gorvak ran a clawed finger along his favorite torture tools, choosing just the right ones to break this intriguing human. Oh, he did so love his work. Proximity alerts flashed on Sarah's HUD. "We've got incoming. Chalnoth guards closing fast." Plasma fire lit up the corridors as the Olympians engaged the Chalnoth in a vicious close-quarters battle. Jack and Sarah moved like blurs, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge shots and crush armor with devastating blows. Mike and Alex laid down covering fire, Gauss rounds punching through scales and cybernetics. But more guards were pouring in with each passing second. They needed to move fast. Jack smashed a Chalnoth's skull with his rifle butt and charged forward. "This way! I'm reading Chris's implant. He's close." Kelzor burst out of the cell in a fury, his forearms ripping a guard's head clean off. These humans were fierce, and they'd just given him the chance he needed. He barreled down the corridor, following the sounds of glorious combat. Chris gritted his teeth as Gorvak's knives flashed, each cut precise and agonizing. The interrogator chittered with cruel amusement. "Such interesting augmentations you have, little ape. You will tell me all about them." The door exploded inward, and Gorvak's head exploded outward as a Gauss round found its mark. Jack charged in, Sarah covering the exit. "Chris, we're here to bring you home." "Took you long enough," Chris laughed, his broken ribs aching with the effort. He nodded to Kelzor as the Krathians smashed the last guard into the wall. "I'm bringing a friend." They blasted their way to the landing pad, alarms howling all around them. Kelzor ripped the hatch off a Chalnoth dropship, the crew dying in a hail of fire from Mike and Alex. "I'll fly, unless you want to be shot down before we break orbit." Neso watched the dropship scream into the sky, his claws gouging furrows into his command console. To be defied like this, in the heart of the Chalnoth Empire. Unacceptable. "I want those humans found," he snarled to his cowering subordinates. "Tear this planet apart until they are kneeling before me, and summon the fleet. If they will not be slaves, then their world will burn." "Couldn't leave our best man in the clutches of those Chalnoth bastards," Jack replied. "But this is just the beginning. Intel you gathered on Zektos Prime is going to help us hit them where it hurts." Sarah stepped up from the gunnery console, her expression grim. "That's going to have to wait. I just picked up some chatter on the comms." She met Chris's eyes, anger and sorrow warring on her face. "The Chalnoth just declared full-scale war on Earth. They're coming." The stolen dropship shook as it blasted out of Zektos Prime's atmosphere. Chris struggled to strap himself into the co-pilot's seat, his broken ribs screaming in protest. Sarah leaned over him, her medkit already out. "Hold still. Let me patch you up." As she applied quick-sealing foam to his wounds, Chris turned to the rest of the team. "I found out something big while I was down there. The Chalnoth have a secret base on Zelkar. They're building a superweapon, something that can wipe out entire planets." Jack's eyes narrowed. "We can't let them finish it. That thing could mean the end of Earth." Kelzor growled, his claws tightening on the controls. "Zelkar is heavily defended. Orbital platforms, fighter squadrons, ground-to-space cannons. It won't be easy to get through." We have to try, Chris said, his voice hard. If we don't stop them now, it's all over. Mike and Alex exchanged a grim look, then nodded. Plot the course, Alex said. We're in. As the dropship hurtled through hyperspace, Neso paced the bridge of his warship, his rage barely contained. I want that human's head on a pike, he snarled. No one makes a fool of me and lives. Karlok, a battle-scarred Chalnoth with a bionic arm, saluted. I've assembled our best fighters. We'll run them down and drag them back in chains. See that you do, Neso growled. Fail me and I'll have your head next to his. The dropship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace near Zelkar. Immediately, alarms blared as a dozen Chalnoth fighters swarmed towards them, plasma cannons blazing. Kelzor roared a challenge and sent the dropship into a dizzying spiral. The humans' advanced weaponry spitting death at their pursuers. Gauss rounds punched through hulls, missiles turning fighters into blooming fireballs. In the chaos, a plasma bolt clipped their wing, sending them tumbling towards the planet's surface. Brace for impact, Jack yelled, grabbing the bulkhead. The dropship hit the ground hard, carving a fiery trail through the jungle. The team kicked their way out of the wreckage, weapons ready. In the distance, the massive Chalnoth base loomed, anti-aircraft guns swiveling to target them. We need to split up, Chris said, checking his rifle. Jack and I will go after the superweapon. The rest of you hit the command center. We need a diversion. Sarah hefted her plasma cannon with a grim smile. Oh, we'll give them a diversion, all right. Just make sure you blow that thing to hell. They charged forward, enhanced muscles propelling them through the undergrowth at inhuman speeds. Chalnoth soldiers poured out to meet them, plasma bolts filling the air. Mike and Alex moved like ghosts, their adaptive camouflage blending them into the jungle. They flanked the enemy, Gauss rifles cracking as they put down target after target with pinpoint headshots. Kelzor waded into the fray like a demon, all four arms wielding stolen Chalnoth blades. He carved a path through the soldiers, his reflexes so fast he seemed to dodge their shots before they even fired. Sarah kicked on her jump jets, soaring over the battle to land on a watchtower in a crash of metal. Her cannon roared, each shot vaporizing a Chalnoth trooper or reducing cover to molten slag. On the other side of the base, Chris and Jack sprinted through the corridors, the blueprints Chris had memorized guiding them to the heart of the installation. Automated turrets popped out of the walls, filling the air with deadly energy bolts. Chris dove and rolled, his rifle snapping up to blast the turrets apart. Jack vaulted over him, his fist shattering a blast door like it was made of paper. They burst into the central chamber, the planet killer looming before them, its barrel aimed at the stars. Chalnoth technicians scattered, reaching for weapons, but Chris and Jack were already among them. The Olympians moved like lightning, bones breaking and blood spraying as they dismantled the Chalnoth with ruthless efficiency. Chris leaped onto the main control panel, his hands flying over the keys. Cover me, I need to set this thing to overload. Jack slapped a breaching charge on the reinforced door, seconds before it exploded inward, to admit a rush of Chalnoth troops. He grinned savagely and opened fire, his rifle chewing through their armor like it was cloth. Karlok barreled through his own soldiers, his bionic arm reconfiguring into a crackling energy blade. He lunged at Jack, the blade sizzling as it clashed against the Olympian's rifle. Jack headbutted the Chalnoth, his enhanced skeleton shrugging off the impact that would have pulped a normal human's skull. Karlok staggered back, his blade slashing down to carve a molten gash across Jack's chestplate. The Olympian just laughed and charged forward, rifle forgotten as he slammed his fist into Karlok's chest, the blow crumpling the Chalnoth's armor and sending him flying back into the wall with a sickening crunch. "Got it!" Chris yelled, ripping out a tangle of wires. Alarms howled as the superweapon began to shake itself apart. "Time to go!" They sprinted for the exit, the base coming down around their ears. Chalnoth soldiers fled in panic as the jungle burned, explosions ripping through the installation. At the extraction point, Kelzor slammed a Chalnoth gunship to the ground, the pilot's neck snapping in his grip. The rest of the team piled in, plasma bolts pinging off the hull as the remaining Chalnoth troops desperately tried to stop their escape. Chris and Jack leaped aboard, Jack hosing the soldiers down with the gunship's heavy repeater as Chris slapped the hatch closed. "Punch it!" The gunship roared into the sky, Kelzor pushing the engines to their limit. Behind them, the base went up in a titanic fireball, the superweapon's death knell shaking the planet. In orbit, Nesso could only watch in disbelief as the human ship blasted past his blockade, leaving a trail of destroyed fighters in its wake. His claws gouged deep furrows into his command chair, rage and humiliation warring within him. This wasn't over. He would have his revenge, even if he had to chase them to the very heart of the human empire. The Chalnoth would not be denied their destiny. Chris and Jack burst into the superweapon chamber, a cavernous space bristling with alien technology. Nesso's elite guard whirled to face them, plasma rifles raised. Jack charged, his enhanced muscles propelling him into the mass of Chalnoth. His fists smashed into their exoskeletons with terrifying force, cracking chitin and crushing organs. Chris darted in his wake, weaving between plasma bolts with inhuman speed. His rifle barked in tight, controlled bursts, each shot finding a gap in Chalnoth armor. They fought back to back, a whirlwind of destruction tearing through the chamber, but the Chalnoth kept coming, heedless of their losses. Chris's eyes fell on the main control panel, a tangle of holographic displays. His enhanced mind raced, deciphering the alien language. His blood ran cold. "Jack, this thing is nearly operational. They could fire it within hours." In the command center, Sarah, Mike, Alex, and Kelzor were locked in their own brutal battle. Karlok lunged at Kelzor, his energy blade hissing as it clashed against the Krathian's twin swords. They traded blows in a deadly dance, sparks flying. "Cover me!" Sarah yelled, sprinting for the control console. Her hands flew over the keys, lines of alien code racing across the screen. "I'm in, shutting down their comms and defenses." Back in the superweapon chamber, Chris and Jack surveyed the destruction. Dozens of Chalnoth lay dead, but more were flooding in from every entrance. Chris's gaze fell on the weapon's pulsing power core. "I have an idea. We overload the core, set it to blow, should take out the whole base." Jack nodded grimly. "I'll hold them off. You rig the explosives." They moved like a well-oiled machine. Chris darted to the core, planting charges at key structural points. Jack took up position at the main entrance, his rifle roaring as he cut down Chalnoth after Chalnoth. Chris typed furiously at the control panel, sweat dripping down his face. "It's set. We have 5 minutes before this whole place goes up." A Chalnoth fist smashed into his jaw, sending him crashing to the floor. He looked up to see Nesso looming over him, the warlord's eyes blazing with hate. "You've interfered for the last time, human," Nesso snarled. "I'll rip you apart with my bare hands." Chris sprang to his feet, his own enhanced body coiled with power. They clashed in the center of the chamber, trading blows that would shatter concrete. Nesso was raw strength, each punch backed by cybernetic pistons, but Chris was speed and skill, dodging and weaving, striking at vital points. Across the room, Jack was a one-man army, his rifle long abandoned as he fought hand to hand. Chalnoth bodies piled around him, but still more surged forward, threatening to bury him under sheer numbers. Chris ducked a swing that would have taken his head off, driving his fist into Nesso's stomach. The warlord doubled over, his armor dented. Chris kicked him to the ground, then stomped down on his skull with a sickening crunch. "Jack," he yelled, "we have to move now." Jack grabbed Chris's arm, yanking him towards the exit. "Come on, we're out of time." But as they sprinted for the door, Nesso staggered to his feet, blood pouring from his crushed skull. With a roar of primal rage, he slammed his fist into the control panel. The superweapon hummed to life, energy coursing through its core. Chris skidded to a halt, his enhanced mind racing as he saw the weapon's barrel swivel towards the distant city of Zarthox. Millions of lives, about to be snuffed out in an instant. "No!" Chris screamed. He spun, charging straight at Nesso. The Chalnoth warlord turned, his eyes widening in shock as Chris slammed into him with the force of a runaway train. They crashed into the pulsing power core, the impact sending shockwaves through the chamber. Nesso's claws scrabbled at Chris's face, ripping and tearing, but the human held on with grim determination, forcing the Chalnoth deeper into the crackling energy field. Jack watched in horror as the core erupted in a blinding flash, consuming both Chris and Nesso. The explosion ripped through the chamber, alarms shrieking as the entire facility shook itself apart. "Chris!" Jack yelled, but there was no answer. Heart-heavy, he turned and sprinted for the exit, dodging falling debris. He burst out into the corridor where the rest of the team was waiting, Kelsaw leaning heavily on Alex, green blood oozing from a dozen wounds. "Where's Chris?" Sarah demanded, her eyes wide. Jack shook his head, his jaw tight. He didn't make it. Gave his life to stop that thing from firing. A moment of stunned silence, broken only by the groan of twisting metal. Then Mike spoke, his voice rough. "We need to move. This whole place is coming down." They ran, half-carrying Kelsaw, retracing their steps through shuddering corridors and past flaming wreckage. The dropship was waiting where they'd left it, its hull scorched and pitted, but still intact. Jack leaped into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, the ship lifting off just as the ground crumbled beneath it. They tore through the atmosphere, the shockwave of the exploding base buffeting the ship. But as they broke orbit, a swarm of Chalnoth fighters descended upon them, plasma cannons blazing. "Karlok," Kelsaw snarled, recognizing the lead fighter. "He will not let us escape so easily." Jack wrenched the dropship into a dizzying roll, narrowly evading a barrage of plasma. Sarah and Mike manned the guns, Gorse rounds and missiles streaking out to meet the Chalnoth head-on. Space lit up with the flash of exploding ships, the dropship weaving and jinking amidst the chaos. But for every fighter they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "We can't keep this up forever," Alex yelled, sparks showering from an overloading console. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Get me close to Karlok's ship." "What are you planning?" Jack asked, even as he complied, sending the dropship hurtling towards the lead fighter. "Something crazy," Sarah replied. She slapped a button and the dropship's airlock hissed open. Before anyone could stop her, she leaped out into the void, her suit's thrusters flaring. She slammed into the hull of Karlok's fighter, magnetic grips locking her in place. The Chalnoth ship bucked and wove, trying to shake her off, but she held on, ripping open an access panel. Moments later, the fighter's movements became erratic, careening wildly. Sarah had overridden the controls. The fighter's guns swiveled, unleashing a barrage on its own allies. The Chalnoth formation broke apart, ships scattering to avoid the friendly fire. In the confusion, Jack gunned the dropship's engines, rocketing away from the battle. Sarah leaped from the hijacked fighter moments before it exploded, tumbling through space, until Alex snagged her with the dropship's grappler. She clambered aboard, breathing hard as cheers erupted from the battered team. But the celebration was short-lived. As they jumped to FTL racing towards Earth, a grim realization settled over them. Chris, their friend and leader, was gone, and the war was far from over. On Earth, Admiral Pavlova stood before a sea of uniformed men and women, her face set in hard lines. "The Olympus project team has struck a major blow against the Chalnoth," she said, her voice carrying across the assembly. "But it has come at a heavy cost. Christopher Johnson, one of our best, sacrificed his life to destroy a Chalnoth superweapon." A murmur ran through the crowd, a mix of grief and anger. Pavlova raised a hand for silence. "His sacrifice will not be in vain. We now know the full extent of the Chalnoth's cruelty and their threat to our way of life. It is time for humanity to strike back." She gestured, and a holographic star map sprang to life. Chalnoth systems glowing an angry red. "We will take the fight to them. We will make them pay for every life they've taken, every world they've burned. We will not stop until the Chalnoth threat is ended, once and for all." Cheers erupted, fists raised in the air. Humanity was going to war. The dropship landed amid a swarm of activity. ground crews rushing to refuel and rearm the battered ship. Jack and the others disembarked to a hero's welcome, medics whisking Kelzor away on a stretcher. But even as they were clapped on the back and congratulated, a sense of unease hung over them. They had won a battle, but at what cost? Jack exchanged grim looks with his team, no rest for the weary. They grabbed fresh weapons and ammo, sprinting for the hangars. The war had come to Earth, and they would be on the front lines. In the depths of space, a vast armada of Chalnoth warships tore their way towards the blue-green jewel of Earth, their hulls bristling with weapons. Aboard the flagship, a new warlord rose to take Nesso's place, his eyes burning with vengeance. Earth would fall and the Chalnoth would feast on its corpse. The Chalnoth warships emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of locusts, their hulls bristling with weapons primed for Earth's destruction. But humanity would not go quietly into the night. Admiral Pavlova's voice crackled over the comms. "Olympus team, you have command. Hit them with everything we've got." Jack settled into the captain's chair aboard the EDS Titan, his eyes hard as he surveyed the tactical display. "All ships, assume attack formation Delta. Concentrate fire on their forward batteries." Beside him, Sarah, Mike, and Alex relayed orders to their own battleships, their enhanced minds processing strategies at lightning speed. On the Thunderchild, Kelzor stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed. "Their fighters will attack in waves," he growled. "We must break their formations before they can swarm us." As one, the human fleet surged forward, their advanced engines propelling them towards the enemy. The Chalnoth opened fire, plasma bolts crashing against the human ship's energy shields in bursts of searing light. The Olympus ships returned fire, their railguns and laser batteries tearing into the Chalnoth hulls. Explosions blossomed in the void as the two fleets clashed, the darkness of space lit by the fury of their exchange. On Earth, sirens wailed as Chalnoth drop pods rained from the sky, smashing into cities across the globe. Soldiers poured from the pods, their exoskeletons glinting in the sun as they opened fire on the terrified civilians. But they were met by the Olympus ground forces, super soldiers with the strength and speed to match the Chalnoth in close quarters. They crashed into the alien lines, their rifles barking and fists pulverizing chitin. In New York, Sergeant Hawkins led his platoon against a Chalnoth company assaulting Times Square. Plasma bolts sizzled past as they took cover behind burned-out vehicles. "Grenade out!" Hawkins yelled, lobbing a plasma charge into a cluster of Chalnoth. The explosion ripped them apart, spraying ichor across the pavement. His men pushed forward, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge the aliens' shots and close the distance. They fought hand to hand, smashing the Chalnoth with augmented strength. Above Earth, the space battle raged on, the human fleet holding the line against the Chalnoth onslaught. But for every warship they destroyed, more seemed to take its place. Suddenly a new contact appeared on the sensors. A sleek black ship dropped out of hyperspace, diving towards the Chalnoth fleet with guns blazing. The mystery ship wove through the Chalnoth formation, its lasers cutting through their hulls like a scalpel. It moved with impossible grace, anticipating the aliens' every move. A comm channel crackled open. "Miss me?" a familiar voice said. Jack felt his heart stop. "Chris, how the fuck are you alive?" "Long story," Chris replied, his ship spinning to evade a plasma volley. "Short version, I stole one of their stealth ships. Figured you could use a hand." With Chris's ship leading the charge, the tide began to turn. He targeted the Chalnoth's weak points with pinpoint accuracy, his inside knowledge of their systems proving invaluable. The Olympus ships rallied around him, forming a spearhead that drove deep into the heart of the Chalnoth fleet. Explosions lit the void as they cut a path of destruction towards the massive Chalnoth flagship. Chris's ship accelerated towards the flagship, the Olympus team close behind. "Then let's finish this," he said, his voice cold as the depths of space. "For Earth, for every soul they've taken. Today, we end the Chalnoth threat, once and for all." The final battle was about to begin. The Chalnoth flagship loomed before them, a monstrous construct of black metal and pulsing red lights. Chris gripped the controls of the dropship, his jaw set. This is it. We take out the Emperor. We end this war. Jack checked his rifle, the power cell humming. Let's send these bastards back to hell. The dropship punched through the flagship's shields, slamming into the hangar bay in a spray of twisted metal. The team leaped out, weapons blazing, cutting down the first wave of Chalnoth warriors before they could react. Alarms blared as they fought their way deeper into the ship, the corridors echoing with the clash of metal and the sizzle of plasma. Chalnoth soldiers poured out from every junction, their exoskeletons gleaming in the harsh light. Mike and Alex took point, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge incoming fire and strike with devastating precision. Mike's fist caved in a Chalnoth skull, while Alex's knife found the gaps in their armor, spilling green ichor on the deck. As they neared the bridge, a towering figure stepped out from the shadows. Karlok, his armor adorned with new insignia, the Emperor's personal guard. "You will go no further, humans," he snarled, his energy blade crackling to life. Mike and Alex exchanged a glance, then charged forward together. They met Karlok head-on, their weapons clashing against his in a furious exchange. The Chalnoth was strong, his augmented body fueled by rage. But the Olympians were faster, their teamwork honed to perfection. They struck as one, Mike's Gauss rifle blasting holes in Karlok's armor as Alex darted in close, his blade finding the weak points. Karlok roared in pain and fury, his counterattacks growing more desperate. With a final synchronized assault, they brought the Chalnoth champion down. But as Karlok fell, his blade lashed out, catching Alex across the chest. The Olympian stumbled back, blood welling from the deep wound. "Alex!" Mike caught his friend as he fell, applying pressure to the gash. Alex gritted his teeth, his face pale. "I'll be fine, go, finish this." Chris, Jack, Sarah and Kelsor burst onto the bridge, the doors exploding inward under the force of their breaching charges. The Emperor's guard met them with a wall of plasma fire, but the team was already moving, their enhanced speed turning them into blurs of motion. Jack and Sarah cut through the guards like a scythe through wheat, their weapons flashing in deadly arcs. Chris vaulted over a console, his fist slamming into a Chalnoth's face with a sickening crunch. And there at the center of the chaos stood Emperor Zorthak himself. He was a colossus, his exoskeleton bristling with advanced cybernetics, his eyes glowing with malevolent power. "Foolish primates," he rumbled, "you only delay the inevitable. The Chalnoth will rule this galaxy." Kelsor let out a roar of pure hatred and launched himself at the Emperor, his twin blades flashing. The two titans clashed, their strength cracking the deck beneath them. Chris, Jack and Sarah fought to reach them, desperately cutting down the remaining guards. But for every one they felled, Zorthak seemed to grow stronger, his cybernetic enhancements glowing brighter. Kelsor was a tempest of fury, his forearms wielding his blades in a dizzying dance of death. But Zorthak was an immovable object, his defenses impenetrable. With a brutal backhand, he sent Kelsor crashing into a bulkhead, the Krathian's ribs shattering from the impact. Chris leaped over a fallen guard, his plasma sword igniting in his hands. He brought the blade down on Zorthak's armor, the superheated edge cutting deep. The Emperor bellowed in pain and rage, his counterattack sending Chris flying. As Chris struggled to rise, he saw Kelsor stagger to his feet, blue blood leaking from his mouth. The Krathian charged once more, his blades stabbing forward in a final, desperate thrust. Zorthak's claws caught him mid-strike, punching through his chest. But as the Emperor roared in triumph, Kelsor's blades sank into the glowing core of Zorthak's cybernetics. The Krathian warrior smiled through bloody teeth. "For my people," he whispered. The Emperor's enhancements exploded in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Zorthak screamed, his body convulsing. Chris saw his chance and leaped, his plasma sword plunging into the Emperor's eye. Zorthak fell like a crumbling mountain. His reign of terror ended at last. Chris knelt beside Kelsor, cradling the Krathian's broken body. "You did it, my friend. You saved us all." Kelsor coughed, his breath rattling. No, Chris, we did it together. Outside, the Chalnoth fleet fell into chaos as news of the Emperor's death spread. The human ships seized the advantage, tearing into the disorganized Chalnoth with renewed fury. The flagship shuddered under the onslaught, explosions ripping through its hull. "We need to go now," Jack yelled, supporting a wounded Sarah. They limped back to the dropship, carrying their fallen comrades. As they blasted away from the dying flagship, Chris looked back at the carnage, his heart heavy. They had won, but the cost had been high. Earth celebrated with parades and fireworks, hailing the Olympus team as saviors. But the festivities were tempered by somber memorial services for the fallen. At a grand ceremony in Washington, D.C., Chris stepped up to the podium, his Olympian uniform crisp and his eyes haunted. Today we honor not just our own, but a warrior from the stars who fought and died for a world not his own. Kelsor was more than an ally. He was a friend, a brother. His name will forever be remembered alongside Earth's greatest heroes. As a 21-gun salute cracked the air, Chris saluted the Krathian flag draped over an empty casket, a symbolic gesture for a hero whose body was lost to the void. In the weeks that followed, the team licked their wounds and mourned their losses. Alex underwent grueling surgeries to repair the damage wrought by Karlok's blade. Mike, at his bedside, joked that chicks dig scars, but the laughter was hollow, the trauma still fresh. Just as they began to find their footing again, a summons from the Galactic Council shattered any illusion of peace. In the grand chambers on Axar Prime, beings from 100 worlds gathered. At the center, the human delegation, Admiral Pavlova and the Olympus team. The Chalnoth were pawns, the Axari counselor intoned, her crystalline skin glittering under the lights. Pawns of a greater threat, the Overseer, a being who orchestrates war and suffering like a conductor before a cosmic orchestra. A murmur rippled through the assembled races. The Overseer was a phantom, a boogeyman whispered about in the darkest corners of the galaxy, but never had they dared to act so brazenly. "This Overseer," Chris growled. "How do we find them? How do we end them?" "We have a weapon," the counselor replied. "Our greatest mind, Zor-El, has developed a technology that can counter the Overseer's greatest asset, their ability to manipulate minds and machinery alike." The Axari scientist stepped forward, his lab coat shimmering with embedded circuitry. "This device can shield you from their influence, disrupt their control over their armies and slaves, but it must be delivered to the heart of their operation." Admiral Pavlova squared her shoulders. "The Olympus team will go. They will end this threat for Earth and for every free world." As one, the team nodded. They had a new mission, a chance to avenge their fallen brothers and sisters, to make the Overseer pay. They were still strapping on their upgraded armor, Zor-El's tech humming against their skin, when a counselor's aide burst into their quarters. "We've detected a massive energy surge on Nexus Prime. The Overseer's forces are gathering." Jack slammed a fresh power cell into his rifle. "Then that's where we're going. We'll bring the fight to them, hit them before they know what's coming." As they boarded a sleek Axari stealth ship, Chris looked out at the stars, his eyes hard. Somewhere out there, the Overseer was plotting their next move. But this time, the Olympus team would be ready. The ship pierced the veil of hyperspace, rocketing towards the brooding shadow of Nexus Prime, towards the final battle. The Axari stealth ship pierced the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, its advanced cloaking technology shielding it from the Overseer's sensors. Chris gripped his plasma rifle, his eyes hard as he surveyed his team. Jack, Sarah, Mike and Alex, their faces grim with determination, checked their weapons one last time. Beside them, Zor-El tapped away at a holographic interface, his Axari tech pulsing with energy. "Remember," Chris said, his voice low, "we hit them fast and hard. Zor-El's tech will disrupt their defenses, but we'll still face heavy resistance. Stay sharp and watch each other's backs." The ship shuddered as it touched down on a rocky outcropping, the hatch hissing open. The team moved out, their enhanced senses scanning for threats. The Overseer's stronghold loomed before them, a monolithic structure of black metal and pulsing red lights. They approached the outer wall, Zor-El's device emitting a high-pitched whine. The air shimmered as the stronghold's shield flickered and died, a hole appearing in the wall. The team charged through, weapons blazing. Inside, alarms blared as the Overseer's elite guards poured into the corridors, their armor a sickly green. Plasma bolts filled the air, sizzling past the team's heads. Chris and Jack took point, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge and weave through the onslaught. They returned fire, their shots precise and deadly. Sarah and Mike flanked them, their weapons spitting death. Alex hung back with Zor-El, his rifle picking off guards who got too close. They pushed deeper into the stronghold, the resistance growing fiercer with every step. Suddenly, a holographic image flickered to life on the wall, a figure that made Chris's blood run cold. Admiral Elena Pavlova, her face twisted with madness, sneered down at them. Pavlova's laughter echoed through the corridors. "Trust? There is no trust in war, only power, and I will have it all." The image vanished, and the team pushed on, their resolve hardened by the revelation. They fought their way to the heart of the stronghold, to Pavlova's command center. The doors exploded inward, and they stormed in, weapons ready. Pavlova stood at the center of the room, her body encased in a sleek black battlesuit, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Welcome to the end, Olympus team," she said, her voice dripping with malice. Chris stepped forward, his rifle leveled at his former mentor. "It's over, Pavlova. Surrender now, and we can end this without more bloodshed." Pavlova's laughter was cruel and mocking. "Oh, Chris, ever the idealist, but there will be blood, so much blood." She moved, faster than any human should be able to, her battle suit enhancing her already formidable abilities. She slammed into Chris, sending him crashing into a console. The others opened fire, but Pavlova was a blur, her suit's shielding absorbing the shots. She lashed out with brutal efficiency, her intimate knowledge of the Olympus Project's enhancements, turning their own strengths against them. Sarah screamed as Pavlova's fist crushed her chest, her body crumpling to the floor. Jack and Alex fought with desperate fury, their blows rocking Pavlova back. But her suit's enhancements were too strong, her counterattacks too swift. Alex fell, his leg shattered by a vicious kick. Jack, his face a mask of blood, staggered back, his rifle clicking empty. Chris, his head ringing, staggered to his feet. He saw Zor-El, the HFY scientist, hunched over a console, his fingers flying over the keys. "Zor-El," Chris shouted, "what are you doing?" The HFY looked up, his eyes filled with grim determination. "Ending this," he said. "Goodbye, my friends." He slammed his hand down on the console, and the command center's power core exploded in a blinding flash of light. Pavlova screamed as her suit's shielding failed, the explosion ripping through her defenses. Chris, seeing his chance, lunged forward, his fist slamming into Pavlova's face. They traded blows, the Admiral's enhanced strength matched by Chris's fury and skill. The command center crumbled around them, consoles exploding and debris raining down. With a final, desperate effort, Chris wrapped his hands around Pavlova's throat, channeling all his grief and rage into his grip. The Admiral's eyes bulged, her hands scrabbling weakly at Chris's arms. With a sickening crunch, her neck snapped, and she went limp. Chris staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked around, his heart sinking as he saw the bodies of his friends, of Sarah and Mike, lying broken on the floor. Jack and Alex, barely conscious, their bodies shattered. The complex shuddered, the explosions growing closer. Chris hauled Jack and Alex to their feet, half carrying, half dragging them towards the exit. They stumbled through the collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and sparking wires. They burst out into the open air, the stealth ship waiting for them. Chris practically threw Jack and Alex aboard, then turned to look back at the stronghold, at the tomb of his friends and the shattered remains of his mentor's twisted ambition. As the ship lifted off, speeding away from Nexus Prime, Chris slumped against the bulkhead, his body racked with pain and grief. The battle was won, but the cost had been too high. Far too high. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.